Okay, so a few years back, I decided that I would leverage learnings that I started picking up from school all the way through my career and put together this idea of a series of presentations to think about, you know, we all say we want to be excellent, we want to be the very best at what we do, but what does that mean? And for me, it means intentionality. So a few years back, I did a presentation at an MD Expo. Anybody there? This would have been 2022, so in SoCal. This was really about the roadmap, looking at being strategic. This is getting rid of the whack-a-mole part. It's like, how do we set a strategic plan for our HTM department that aligns with our organizational vision and mission? What's our slice of the pie, right? And so we took the time to talk about goals, making them smart, making them strategic and measurable and impactful and all those things. We talked vaguely a bit about what happens. These goals need to be something that if they're not achieved, something bad happens, right? Something uncomfortable happens, right? So how do we know? So today's about, we're going to focus on the topics of metrics and KPIs. And that's how we figure out, that's our odometer, right? That's how far we know we're down the road. Are we down the road? Did we go the wrong way? Do we need to adjust? Okay. But the big question is, all you guys, you know, most of you, all of you that I know anyway, have been in this business long enough to know that we can measure almost anything, right? There's hundreds of metrics, hundreds, if not thousands of metrics we could measure. But which ones? Which ones? And KPIs. To me, KPIs are the subset of those hundreds or thousands that I actually care about. I mean, I've worked in organizations where they had, we'll just make them numbers easy. There were 100 things we measured, but we really only paid attention to 6, right? Those 6 to me were the KPIs. Am I going the right way? Right, but how did we make that decision? Any thoughts? Like, how do you know which metrics to do? How do you guys decide? Clarice.
Within the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have several national work groups that have frontline staff member participation, and then we also have other leaders that are at either regional or national level directing. And so we have 13 different KPIs across our enterprise that range from patient safety, so number of overdue action recalls is one, number of unsupported operating systems that do not have a replacement plan. And of course, we have our PM members.
Okay. Okay, so there's a group that makes that decision for the whole system. Are there other similar sort of things? Yeah, Al? No regional VPs care about PM completion. Right, uptime. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, so if you're measuring a lot of things, what stands out that your organization needs to improve? Okay, all great comments. I will suggest to you, it depends upon what question you're trying to answer. What's the question, right? Let's make sure we understand what we're trying to address. So this is what will bring me back to the work we did back in 2022 during my session. And we'll take just a couple of these. We'll start with people, and I'll give you some of my thoughts about answering the questions or addressing the issues that we have in a couple of these areas. Okay, so the first one on the people, our overall goal was to recruit, hire, and retrain top talent, minimize the number of open positions, and reduce the negative impact on our department as well as the organization. Okay, especially clinical operations. The first initiative we identified is I need a recruiter that can find my kind of people, right? So those are just a few suggestions, people I've worked with in the past. But that was our immediate. So this is, if this is an immediate initiative for this goal, this is where we should be putting our focus, right? So what's the data? What data would you anticipate needing to give to these recruiters or your in-house recruiter to begin that recruitment part up there? Expectations, okay. Qualifications, skill sets. Good. Okay. I'm going to say yes. The position, what are the positions we're actually recruiting, right? Is this a entry level BMET? Is this an experienced clinical engineer? Is this a supervisor? Is it the department director? What is this, right? How many of you deal with the fully loaded cost of the position? Yes, sir, Chris, yeah. Fully loaded cost of a position. Does everybody in the room know what that is? Anybody? I should ask it the other way. Anybody not know what that means? I'm sorry? Break it down. Sure. So fully loaded, so we're all aware of what our salary is. But when you're budgeting for a staff member, you have to know what's the cost of all the benefits that go with them, the cost to the organization, what is the, and I'll also suggest to you that it's, the cost of the recruiter, right? If you're not using in-house recruiters, if you're having to use externals, there's typically fees that go with that. But your employee has expenses associated with them beyond just the salary we pay them, even beyond time and a half overtime and things like that, shift differentials, all that sort of stuff needs to be considered. But also, what's the markup, so to speak, on the employee? And that varies by organization. In some organizations, it's a very low percentage. I worked in an organization once where that number was somewhere around 50 to 60%, which was terrifying. But I was pleased with my benefits. Chris. Yes. Exactly. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, ask your HR department if you're recruiting, and it's just good to know. You're not gonna, you may or may not see that depending on how your department or your organization does budgets. You may or may not see that as a line item, but it's there. It's there on somebody's budget, and HR can tell you that number. I like that word, the escalator. I like that. Okay, so places, if this is a new position for you, or you're looking to figure out what's the market rate and whatnot, there's a few places you can go. You guys have probably heard of the 24/7 surveys, right? Our friends at the VA are very generous with the public information. Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Title 38, I hope I have that right. And hopefully these links work when you guys look at this on the MD Publishing website. But there's some good, this will get you in the ballpark, right? In terms of what are pay ranges for different levels of jobs. And I applaud our colleagues at the VA because they've done a lot of work in this space over the last, geez, probably 10 years. So now, so what do we do with this? Now we know what we're doing, we know who's gonna help us, and we know what data we need to collect. I'm gonna pitch to you a somewhat weird idea that is, we need to understand what's the cost ratio for our staff. You know, cost of staff ratio. All right, what's the total cost of bringing someone on compared to what I'm paying them? And am I doing it? Am I being thoughtful, right? In another conversation I had, someone figured the cost in of how long I had to wait because I did not engage any of these specialists. It took me longer. So that was another data point up here that we had to factor into the cost of bringing somebody on board, right? So that's, I sometimes refer to that of what's the risk of not doing this, and by doing this, I mean getting a specialist to help you. It could be a high cost. You might not be able to fill a position for a year. I've seen people have that problem. Does that make sense? Do you guys, did anybody ever think about it this way? Density of population, right? Yeah. How much of a supply do I have to fill my demand? Yeah. Cool. Yes, sir. Amen. Amen. Thank you for saying that. I was gonna say, so when would this be useful? And Chris, you just hit it on the head. Right, 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 right. And I think Chris raises an excellent point that I want you to think about as we go through all of these, which is who are what question are you trying to answer? And who are you talking to, right? So this idea of knowing what your escalator is to the cost of staff is incredibly important in terms of establishing some credibility with your finance department and your CFO or your HR department or whoever it is you're talking to, because now you understand the bigger picture of the hospital's economics, right? Okay, so let's look at another example, maybe. Okay, so same goal, a near term, not as big a crisis, but a near term, say maybe in the next 1 to 2, 3 years, we need to create a job family, add a position or two, refine what we have. Do you guys know what a job family is? Anybody heard that term? Okay, I learned this term about 10 years ago. It is how HR thinks about groups of positions that are related to each other. So in my circumstance, there was like the big umbrella of all of the HTM function that I had responsibility for. And I had a job family for our technicians, whether they were biomeds or imaging or whatever. So there was the job family for that. There was the job family for my clinical engineers. There was a job family for our construction related equipment planners. And then we had a job family for management. So I had 4, right? And these were stair stepped up. So from pick any of those level, entry level up through most senior level, okay? And that's how my HR department looked at groups of these. And then they had their pay scales, you know, the pay ranges, right? $0 to $12 or whatever, right? They were associated with each job family. So that's a question. Go spend some time with your HR and ask them, how do they group these? Do they use job families? Do they use job groupings? Whatnot, so that you understand what you have to work with, right? Now, if you had to build a new one, you need to know that, right? Do we need to create it? Do we need to adjust something that already exists? I had to do some of this. In the job family, once I understood what was there, I could see the gaps, right? There were leaps, or in the case of my engineers, there was one. I'm like, so the person I hired right out of school has the same job description and pay range as the person that's been here 30 years? Yeah, that's not working for me. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't work for somebody in that pay range. So understanding those individual job grades and whatnot. Again, we're back to fully loaded and the budget impact, okay? I'm also going to suggest to you, look at your positions. I have a saying, get the right people doing the right work at the right place. Not all of your jobs that you need, not all of the positions you need are maintenance. Not all of them are management. Some of them are non-maintenance, non-management type jobs. Talk to your HR and find out how those get classified as well, okay? But that's important because when we start looking at how do we calculate the impact, back to sort of that cost of labor ratio, if you will, we need to understand what kind of data are we gathering. Well, for my maintenance positions, we can fall to our traditional hours of scheduled versus corrective, right? And if we have really good data in our CMMS, that should be a pretty easy pull, right? If your folks are tracking their time and their activities, if you've done the standardization, selfish, unabashed plug for the white papers, you know what kind of work's being done, right? So that's a pretty straightforward one for maintenance. We're used to doing that. Sort of tier 2 advanced practice is, can you take that down to an equipment type? So I know, do I need a BMET general purpose? Do I need a mid-level imaging engineer that knows CT or whatever? Or do I need an advanced practice BMET that does anesthesia and ventilators and balloon pumps and things like that, right? Because if you have that time data down to the equipment type level, then you can really target in on what kind of person do I really need to hire. That is extraordinarily helpful to your HR folks because they don't know, nor is it their job to know, right? Okay, on the non-maintenance side, I get a lot of questions about this because 98% of the work I've done over my career is non-maintenance. It's project-based, administrative base. And I'll tell you, it was a smack in the face when I went out to do private practice, because I thought, well, I sort of tracked it when I was doing it before, but I really have to now, right? I need to know how long does it take me to do a project. So if you asked me to do a project for you, I'd have to be able to say, I have to think about, well, how long is that going to take? So I charge enough to cover my costs, and pay my mortgage, but I'm not like running, you know, a ridiculous tab with you or whatever, right? I need to know what my hours are. So any of you that have engineers or project managers, people like that, I would encourage you to have them start tracking their hours. Use the CMMS. We used an app on the phones that made it easy for them. However, it's, you know, it's just, you need those hours to be able to go back and do that value analysis, if you will, of what is this person going to cost me. And to Chris's earlier conversation, when you're sitting down having a discussion with your finance group, with your finance officer, you need to be able to say, I need this kind of person to deliver this kind of project. It might be device integration, it might be a construction excavation, it might be cyber vulnerability analysis or whatnot. Not day-to-day maintenance activities, but these are project-based, start and end. We know what it's going to take. Lots of folks find themselves struggling to get that person because they don't have the hours. They don't know how long it's going to take to do it. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. 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 And so I want to, right. So for the purposes of the recording and other in the room, Al's talking about with your technician staff being able to really look at the maintenance hours that are really related to a device. You can say I did this on this asset versus the some people will call non-productive. My guess is that the other work is productive and it's purposeful. If it's not, then we need to have a conversation. But what I'm referring to are true project hours. And I would caution you from just putting them in one bucket, because the time required to do a device integration versus a cyber vulnerability versus a full product technology assessment versus some other type of construction related project to specify out, you know, whatever, working with architects and all of these take a little bit different time and different skill set. So I caution you, these hours here, these project type hours, data analytics hours, if you've got somebody that's focused on your CMMS that's running all of this, those are different people from the folks that are doing the true maintenance activity. I also encourage you to look at it that way because I have literally stood in front of grown men who were almost in tears because people like us had shoved so much stuff on their plate and the expectations were ridiculous. Absolutely, because we are like, oh, it's just one little thing. Oh, it's just this little thing. They're not little things. Okay, let's be respectful of the talent. The talent is what is our most valuable asset as leaders in this organization. Take the time to understand what the work is, and maybe that, you know, just because that lead tech is awesome, let's keep them awesome. Let's not like just mow them over. Let's get a body that has the right skill set and either move that awesome person over to do this new work and backfill them, or let them continue being awesome where they are and get somebody to do this new work that's presented itself. All right, there's plenty of work to go around. And if we do our homework like this, we can have a good conversation with our CFO, right, Chris? Absolutely. All right. So one more on this. This is an interesting problem that I've seen in the last 5 years is this, because we have more and more health systems come together and looking at the service areas, right? So geography is sometimes a metro area that has ridiculous traffic problems. Like I worked in Northern California in the Bay Area for a while. I mean, we had to do a bridge count and a toll count and figure out like what it took to get just from Oakland to San Francisco or San Francisco back. Never mind actually do work in either of those places. Just get across a bridge, right? There's time involved there. So had to think about how do we distribute people to minimize the windshield time, right? The travel time. I know we've got some field service folks in it. So, you know, you have to think about like how much time is it going to take me on an airplane to get there? How much, you know, what's that plan? Right. 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 So, and in other cases, there was a health system that was the better part of a state. Now, it wasn't Texas-sized state, but it was certainly bigger than a New England state. Okay. And they had to figure out how do we cover? I mean, I literally sat in the car and rode with these people. I'm like, this is what your tech does? Your tech sits in the car for an hour and drives from the mothership out to here? That maybe isn't a good idea because you're telling me that you have customer service issues there, right? So the data we need is we need to look at how much time are we spending? How much time are we spending, again, back on planned versus corrective? What's the problem? Are we not meeting our PMs, or do we have customer service issues, people that are upset because their stuff don't work, right? Or maybe both, right? We have to have that data. And I would say that, again, unabashed plug for the white papers. If you're doing the work order standardization and if you're doing failure code standardization in your CMMS, that should be a fairly easy pull for you, okay? And then we can get back to what are our total hours we're spending at these different service areas. And we can go back to that other calculation about what kind of staff do we need in those places and what kind of, how many do we need? Because we have the hours, right? If we know how much time we're spending there. And that, if it looks like a lot, especially on either of these, it also sort of begs a new question for you to dig some data on, which is, boy, that seems like an awful lot of hours we're spending on scheduled maintenance out there. Let's figure out what's going on there. Or we have an awful lot of correctives out there. Why is that? Do we have a use error? Do we have a design error? Do we have, you know, what's going on there, right? So going through this exercise, even if your service area is just a metro, or if it's a state, or if it's a region, or a country, you know, looking at this service area periodically is an incredibly important metric KPI for some people. Yes, sir. Yeah, your metro area is Rochester, Florida, and Arizona. Heather, yes. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 I might add that on here. You know, it's not just miles. Right. Well, and the thing I didn't put up there is travel time. Right. Whether you charge for it or not, I don't care. It still exists. Right. Knowing what the travel time is. And you're right. That's going to vary on the weather conditions. Right. Right. And if you're doing field service, if you're managing field service, we're right. I mean, yeah, if we don't have TSA agents, there's no cars available, whatever. I mean, so you're right. There's all of these. I mean, this is sort of the minimum data set you need if you're looking at your regional assignments. But I don't think a lot is in the conversations I've had in the last 10 years, maybe 15. There's a lot of folks that are just not looking at these issues, and they're just sitting there sort of fibrillating in frustration. And if we do collect the data right, we can answer this problem. We can begin addressing it. We can't do anything about closed bridges. I've tried. Clarice, did you have a? Right. Yep. I used to have a team in Hawaii and same sort of thing. Yep. Planes, trains, automobiles. Yes, sir. Right. Mhm. Right. Right. And that's a very real thing. And it's not just microclimates and mountains of Colorado. That happens in urban areas because you can't get from here to there in a timely manner. Right. So these are all very real things that we don't often deal with. Yes, John. Mhm. And it's like, that might be a problem, right? Using electric vehicles in very cold temperatures. We have the inverse problem in the West. Sometimes heat like messes with those things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 So, I mean, like this whole staffing thing, is it now like 42 times more complex than you thought when you walked in this morning? I'm telling you, this has been one of the coolest things about my career is working in all these weird environments. I'm like, whoa, I never thought about that. Yeah. Let's keep going because we got some others. So I want to move on to technology because it's my favorite. And when we talked about this back in 22, we talked about it from, I say internally and externally. So internally, what are the technological needs and priorities that for me to run a HTM department? And externally, that's more about the medical devices, the technology that I need to make sure is there, available, running, reliable for my clinical partners, okay? So I like to, this particular pillar, I like to look internally and externally, okay? So our first immediate initiative is to do all of the things that we just talked about. We got to have a solid CMMS. And one of the things that because I was going through it in my last quote unquote real job, the CMMS implementation. And since then, as I've worked with folks and talked with some of you, the implementation of a CMMS is the worst part, and it's the tripwire. And I don't care what supplier you use, we could have the platinum, most amazing, perfect CMMS tool, and I can tell you that 50% or more of the departments are going to implement it, and it's going to be a piece of junk because they're not managing the project. They're not managing this as something other than pour the cereal out of the box and put milk on it. It's sad. It's really scary. So what do you need? The things, the lessons, the hard, painful lessons I learned is if you don't have policy, process, and procedures, which is a part of the governance pillar that we're not going to touch on today, but if you don't have those, you better start working on those fast. Because everybody has an opinion, and I have 5 opinions on every question, okay? You need to get that codified. There are resources. There's books about what a CMMS should do for you. That's an Amy resource. There's the white papers that I've already mentioned. There are all of your colleagues at MD Expo and other conferences, right? Get that stuff figured out. Get your requirements figured out, okay? I know we've got some folks that have been on both sides of that CMMS question in the room. They've seen the ugly and the good on both sides. But I will tell you, if you don't have that governance documented, it's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be hard with your staff. It's going to be hard with your CFO who's paying for the thing. It's going to be hard with your IT department that's going to say, why do you need that? What? Because you don't have documented what you need and why you need it. And being really clear. And I'm not talking about, I want this block in the upper right corner, right? I'm talking about real technical, what do I have to meet regulatory requirements and my internal service requirements in my CMMS. Prioritizing, everything is not a gotta have. I'm sorry, everything, there's a lot of nice to haves and we're gonna grab as many as we can, but that's gonna be, that you have to be the leader, you have to be the adult in the room and work towards consensus of, I can make this work, I can be part of the team, I can carry this forward, right? Okay. And then adhering to a timeline. I cannot tell you the number of colleagues or clients that I have seen that are like, well, we're getting there. Like, you're not managing this as a project, right? We're back to that project hours thing. I had a dedicated person to work on this project because it took so many hours and driving the consensus conversations and helping set them up so that I could come in and facilitate and things like that. That was a full-time job. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yes. So two follow-ons on that. In my last life, I had a meeting with the managers, and I said, you guys are complaining about this or that or whatever. This is all stuff. This is data that you should have access to. You should be able to have conversations about. Well, we don't have the data. I'm like, and whose fault is that? Well, the tax one. No. When have you proposed to them what this data is for? How is it going to make their life better? What are you doing with that data? Is this just about compliance? Are you just policing that they filled out their work order right? Or are you doing something? Because if you're not going to use that data to manage those techs and help them get their life better and our service better, then I'm going to go stand shoulder to shoulder with them and say, we're not collecting anything. Again, about 5 grown men almost fell to their knees. I said, I'm holding you guys accountable, right? The techs are out there doing work. You need to help them understand why we need this data. And then I turned around to my CMMS person, and when Matt Baratich and I wrote these papers, and Al, you were in the room with us, how many times did Matt and I say, yes, and this has to be easy, or at least less hard, for the text to document? Because if this is hard and it doesn't have purpose and meaning, they're not going to do it. And Matt and I are going to go stand next to them and say, don't worry about it. Right? So it really is, you have to think about the big picture and not just that one report that you want to take to the Environment of Care Committee or whatever, right? Really think about the operations. All right, keep it moving because we're probably behind at this point. Near term, if you don't have those processes, we'll go through this one fairly quickly. Get your processes defined, get somebody to help you, get an intern, get a consultant, get a student, something. I mean, there's tons of people that, yeah, the VA, you guys are great. You take my interns from UConn, and I know they work on that, and that the non-VA, they do a lot of this kind of work because it's very detailed, it's time consuming. You got to read 1 million documents, you got to talk to 1 million people, but you got to get that done. Yeah. Right. 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 The make model makes a difference. Right. 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 And I know you live in the world, Brianna, you live in the world of imaging, so that's not an AEM thing. I'll tell you, uh-oh, what did I do? Oh, okay, it's back. In the AEM world, I see all kinds of what I would call non-compliant. Like, that has to be documented. If you're gonna do AEM, everybody needs to be doing the same AEM on that make model, right? Like my version, Chris's version, Rihanna's version, no, we have one, right? Or you're gonna find yourself in a little bit of compliance regulatory problems. So again, measure, right? This isn't something you're gonna measure forever and a day. We're answering a question, right? The question is, do I have my policies and procedures and all of that documented and standardized? Yes, no, this is a project-based sort of thing, right? And then one of my true favorites on the technology side is really working with the medical equipment. This is where we start looking externally. Okay, so we've addressed the internal CMMS data, the maintenance management side. Now we're going to look at the technologies that need to be provided to our clinicians. Do we have a game plan? Do we have all those things? Do we have policy of how we participate and whatnot? This is just my minimum list when I do work for health systems, and this goes all the way back to the late 90s, actually early 90s. This is minimum, right? And there's another presentation out there about end of life. I'm not going to dive into that, but I will say very quickly, there are 3 types of end of life. There's the technical one that we're very familiar with. Does the manufacturer make it? Do they sell it? Do they service it, right? And then there's a clinical one. Is it relevant? Does it do what the clinician needs? And how much do they use it? What's utilization? If you're just burning this thing up, then you're pushing the technical end of life. The thing's going to die, right? So clinically, we need to look at a couple things. And then please, 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 the AHA Blue Book is not a technical clinical measure of how long this device has a useful life. That is a financial tool. That is a depreciation schedule. Okay. And that's available online as well. Okay. So that's the minimum data set. Again, what I just said, you're looking at it 3 ways. How many of you are involved in this sort of work in your health systems? You used to do it? Okay. Mayo does a little bit of that. Yeah. You're doing a little bit of that? Just starting. Good. Good. You don't have to be, I always say, if you just get started, right? So this is my objective, because you're really trying to figure out what's the most important. You're trying to create priorities. But I would encourage you, just as a sidebar, build, from our perspective, build it as comprehensive as you can, technical, clinical, financial, but also build it as objectively as you can. Have as much data behind it as you can. Because I promise you, Execulan will add all the color commentary that's needed. Promise. I'm sorry? Right. And yes, and we could have a whole, and I do a whole nother session on that one. Yeah, I should just not even get started on that one, because I was telling a 350. Yes, and it should be in an appropriate manner. I was just telling someone last night a story of a 350 billion with a B story last night, dollars. So anyway, so these last 2, I mean, you get the hint. Today's about, look at the data you have, look at the data you don't have. What are the questions you're trying to answer? And those questions change, and sometimes you need to measure, and we need KPIs for the purposes of a project, start date, end date. Sometimes we need something that goes over time. A lot of these were more project specific, although I would say the service area one is something you probably should look at on an annual basis, because every place I've ever worked for and with, that geographic thing, that service area thing, is in constant flux. But a lot of these are project ones that we need the measures for a defined period of time. But if anybody's interested, I may or may not go into the other 2 in Baltimore. Depends on what MD Publishing wants me to do, if anything. But I would love to dig into some of these others with any of you that are interested in just sort of thinking through, because I always learn from you guys as much as I hope you learned something here today. So thank you for getting up early and being with me. Any other comments or questions? I don't know how much time we have left. I'm sorry? Yes, the MD Publishing, MD Expo people are fabulous. This year, I remembered to turn my microphone on, so it's all recorded. So you can go onto their website, and they'll have past education, and not just this meeting. You could go all the way back to the 2022 meeting and see that other one if you felt like you wanted it or needed it. And all of my colleagues that have presented back, gosh, probably 10 years. I don't know, other views that have presented. I think it goes back a good 10 years. Great resources. And when you listen to them, because you sign in and whatever, you can get your CEUs for your certification if you need that too. Yes, sir. Al. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. And that last piece is so important. And I don't care whether we're talking about technical maintenance related activities or project related, all of us, you know, as a clinical engineer, it was always nice for me to get feedback. Am I doing what needs to be done? Or am I mean, I had a general sense of, I feel like I'm doing busy work. Like, really, what's the point of this? But I usually had a good manager that did what you said, that was looking at it and going, yeah, you know what, let's scale back on that. Or they clarified for me why this was important. I'm like, all right, well, it's not my favorite work, but I see why it needs to be done. Okay, I get that. You're absolutely right. Absolutely. Oh God, yes. Yes. So, yeah, the point being, we give, choice is nice. Choice is nice. We all like to have a choice, but too many choices becomes debilitating and not useful to, I mean, it's debilitating to the person who has to enter it, and it's not useful to the people that are trying to use the data to make informed decisions. So you're absolutely right. And I would say it's not just technicians. We talked about a lot of project things. It's not just the scheduled work or the corrective work. It's all of that project work. It's all the administrative work as well. And when we wrote the white papers, again, that was another thing we said. Let's, two things. One, this list cannot, I mean, we had meetings and I'm like, I can't keep up with this. This is ridiculous. And we're calling some of the same things, we're just using different words, right? This is all the same thing. Consolidate it down because you're right. They're only going to look at, you know, oh, wait, well, I can only see 5 of the 25. All right, well, I'll just pick one of those, right? And define them. Define them. What does it mean? Like, what does that choice mean? Right? Make that clear. And then to me, this is a big difference between management and leadership. Not all managers are leaders, right? We would like to believe that all managers are leaders, but some of your best leaders don't manage people, right? Some of your best leaders are in the field. So incorporate them to make sure these things are well defined, well understood, and then communicate them. Don't just publish them in a document on a Google Drive somewhere. Spend time with your staff interacting and make sure they understand it, right? Do some tests, do some piloting, you know, get your folks, the person that never understands anything, like have them look at it with you, right? Did they, because they're not, you know, completely useless people, you know, they just see the world different, right? I like, that's me, I know I'm a lot, I know I'm difficult, but I see the world differently, all right? So float it past me. If it makes sense to me, then there's a good chance it'll make sense to others, all right? Or vice versa. But it's about being real leaders, not just managers. Anybody have a clock that works? Because my phone is like, I don't know, I think it moved to Alaska. 10 minutes. Okay, so we're doing really good. Are there other metrics that, I mean, I had to pick a few, and I tried to pick some little odd ones, weird problems that people were bringing to me or that I was discussing. Other ones that you guys would like to dissect? Yes, sir. Devices per tech. Okay. A 1,000 per tech versus 3,000 per tech. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. What kind of equipment are we talking about? Did you have 3,000 imaging pieces of equipment per tech? Absolutely not. Right. Okay. So again, I have 5 opinions on every question. On this one, I am not a big fan of devices per tech because of some of the other things we talked about. It is a measure, but using it as a KPI, I think is extraordinarily dangerous because it gets rolled up. I have a very similar opinion about cost of service ratio. Okay. My recommendation and the way I've practiced and what I suggest to people is at a minimum, look at this by equipment type. At least 3 buckets, please. Biomed, imaging, lab. Because the factors around those 3 are very different. Very different. The time it takes Triana to do one of her ultrasounds or other imaging equipment is very different than it takes somebody to do one fleet type device, or even maybe an anesthesia machine. She may be able to do some of her stuff faster than what it takes for an anesthesia machine. I don't know these days. I haven't, been that close to it. But not looking at the end of these types means you get weird numbers like that. Like, you're right, 3,000 devices per technician is like, and what am I supposed to do with this? But I would say if you hand me and tell me it's 1,000 devices per device, I'm gonna be like, what do you want me to do with that? I don't know what to do with that. It's like telling me there's a McDonald's with iced coffee coming, but it doesn't tell me what exit or how many miles away it is. It's just teasing me with, with a cheap iced coffee. Say more. What do you mean? No. Okay, first off, I would say if AHA ever published how long it takes to be a PM, I would burn that document. I would burn that document because they are finance people and they wouldn't know an MRI if it ran them over in the hall. By the way, MRIs don't go down the hall. So, but ECRI, I think, published some of that. But again, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I think you need the data, and you need to say, based on my staff, okay, so I have the ECRI publication, which I would look at as a reference point, right? But then I would look at my staff. Do I have very green people? Do I have very experienced people? Do I have, is this a new thing? I would look at more data points than just the published, this is how long it should take to do. And sometimes those documents are like, it should take this long to do a defibrillator, an anesthesia machine, an ultrasound. And I think Rihanna made a good point before, you got to know the make model. Yes. Right. God, I hope they updated it. Right. Yes. 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 And I would say keep doing that. Look at the time as opposed to use them both as metrics, right? I mean, you could the devices per tech is a pretty easy arithmetic calculation, right? So that's one point. But having the hours gives you specificity and accuracy. Yeah. And don't ever take technical information from AHA. Right, right. I was gonna say, that's a great example of going back, selling your CFO on, here's the capital I need, looking internally technology. Exactly. I've done the study. I have this much time. I have these many people. Here's, if I do it, keep doing it the way I did. Here's the cost. If I do it with this new piece of equipment, here's what we can do. I mean, that's a whole different story than I need this new shiny object. Now we're playing the stomping clinician game, which none of us approve of, so we should not participate in. Chris. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. 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 Yeah, but I think, and yes, 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 yes. And I think in there is implied leadership over management, right? And I remember those, you got to document, I mean, I remember it from yesterday in places I've been, not just 37 years ago, right? Right. And to me, that's punitive. That's not leadership. That's not purposeful. It's not intentional. You are going to get what you're asking for and more, because you're going to have people that don't see you as a leader. You're going to get people that don't get satisfaction out of their job, and they're going to go someplace where they do. And lots of bad things happen when we're just punitive in nature. When we're communicating as a team, that's when having the data and being intentional just pays off in spades, because you get buy-in, you get true collaboration, and people go the extra mile when they feel like that's what the person at the very top of their food chain is doing, right? And I'll just leave you with one last thing. I've managed probably 3 or 4 different times, not continuously. I'm the kind of person that needs to step back and be an individual contributor for a while and then come back to it. But I never, ever, ever wanted my staff. The one thing I would absolutely correct them on is when they said, I work under Carol. I said, you do not. You work beside me. You do not work under me. Nobody works under me. Well, except for maybe my boss who's being a butt today. But I said, no, nobody works under me. Everybody, we're on a team. I grew up being a student athlete. And when you don't have second base, or you don't have your third base coach when you're running the bases, life gets real ugly. It takes all of us. It takes the front office, right? Hiring the right people. It takes the coach, takes the trainer, takes everybody. Yeah, maybe the pitcher is the one that gets to be on the news and the interviews. But if all the other players aren't there working side by side, shoulder to shoulder, showing up and doing what their job is, you don't win the game. I promise you. I don't care how many All-Stars you have on the team. You're not going to win that game. Well, thank you for being here. I'll let you guys go get coffee. Thank you.